During a party at a luxurious mansion, the millionaire was frozen when he noticed the waitress was wearing his daughter's pendant from 15 years ago. He approached, and the shimmering lights of Ethan Blake's Malibu mansion reflected off the vast Pacific, a breathtaking view that had become nothing more than a meaningless backdrop. The party inside was in full swing, crystal glasses clinking, expensive laughter filling the air, and the scent of cigars and fine whiskey lingering like ghosts of a life he had long stopped caring about. Ethan stood near the grand staircase, his posture effortless yet detached, his gaze lost in the sea of elegantly dressed guests. His hand gripped a glass of whiskey, but he barely sipped it. These events had become routine, an expectation from a man of his wealth and status. But deep down, he despised them. He had built an empire, a fortune that most men would kill for. Yet the one thing that mattered most had been stolen from him 15 years ago. The loss had hollowed him out, leaving behind only an empty shell of the man he once was. And then, just as he was about to leave the party and retreat to his study, he saw her. It was nothing more than a flicker in his peripheral vision at first, a presence barely noticeable in the chaos of the evening. A young woman, weaving her way through the crowd, balancing a tray of champagne flutes. She was just a waitress, another nameless face in a sea of people who would be gone by morning. But then, the necklace. A delicate silver butterfly pendant dangled from her neck, catching the light in a way that sent a cold, sharp jolt through Ethan's body. His breath hitched. His mind screamed at him. It's impossible. But his heart ignored the logic. He took a step forward, his body moving before his thoughts could catch up. The young woman turned slightly, giving him a clearer view of her face. The resemblance was undeniable. Ethan felt the room shrink, the air thick with something he couldn't name. His chest tightened, his pulse quickened. He had spent 15 years staring at the last photograph ever taken of Grace, memorizing every delicate feature of his daughter's face. And this girl, she had the same eyes. His grip on the whiskey glass tightened, fingers trembling. It couldn't be. It had to be a coincidence. But then why couldn't he breathe? His feet moved on their own. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the greetings and nods of recognition from his so-called acquaintances. His entire world had narrowed down to that girl, the butterfly pendant hanging around her neck, and the way his heart pounded like a war drum inside his chest. She turned again, and for the first time their eyes met. She blinked, slightly taken aback by his intense stare, but quickly composed herself. "Excuse me," Ethan said, his voice even, but his heart anything but. The young woman hesitated, then smiled politely. "Yes, sir. Would you like a drink?" Ethan barely glanced at the tray. His attention was locked onto her face, scanning every detail, every curve of her features, every possible trace of familiarity. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She seemed caught off guard. Claire. Claire Evans. Not Grace. Claire. The name meant nothing to him, but the unease in his gut only grew. His eyes dropped to the necklace. "That pendant. Where did you get it?" Claire's hand instinctively touched the butterfly charm, her fingers grazing the silver edges as if drawing comfort from it. For a fleeting second, a shadow passed over her expression. Hesitation, confusion, but then she smiled again, though this time it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've had it for as long as I can remember," she said. "It was with me when I was found." Ethan's throat went dry. Found. Claire shifted her weight slightly, as if sensing the weight of his stare. "Yeah, I grew up in an orphanage in Texas. I don't really know where I came from, just that someone left me there when I was little." She gave a small shrug, as if the story didn't carry the weight it should. "This necklace is the only thing I have from my past." Ethan felt the world tilt. Texas, an orphanage, no memory of her past, a silver butterfly pendant. The odds of this being a coincidence were nearly non-existent. A storm raged inside him. He forced a nod, swallowing hard. "It's a beautiful piece." "Thanks," she said, offering another polite smile before glancing at the tray in her hands. "I should get back to work." He let her go. He had no choice. He couldn't just grab her, demand answers, or force her to believe what he was beginning to suspect. But deep in his gut, something screamed at him. "She's Grace." Ethan stood frozen in place as she disappeared into the crowd, her presence vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The sounds of the party faded, drowned beneath the thunderous pounding of his own heart. After 15 years of endless searching, of unanswered questions, of hoping and losing hope, he might have just found her. He inhaled sharply, forcing his hands to steady. There was only one way to find out the truth. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his fingers steady despite the chaos inside him. "Brandon?" he said when his private investigator answered. "I need you to look into someone. Tonight." The hunt had begun. Ethan barely slept that night, after the party had died down and the last guest had left. He found himself pacing the length of his study, replaying every detail of his brief interaction with Claire. He could still see her face, the way she had instinctively touched the butterfly pendant when he asked about it, the way her eyes flickered with something, hesitation, recognition. He wasn't sure. What he did know was that he needed answers, and he needed them fast. At exactly 5 a.m, his phone buzzed on his desk. He grabbed it instantly. "She's real," Brandon, his private investigator, said on the other end of the line. Claire Evans, 23 years old, grew up in a small orphanage in Austin, Texas. No birth certificate, no record of biological parents. She was found abandoned near a gas station when she was around 3 years old. Ethan closed his eyes, his fingers tightening around the phone. 3 years old. Grace had been 3 when she disappeared. "Any leads on how she ended up there?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Brandon sighed. "It's murky. The records from the orphanage say she was left outside a gas station in Phoenix, Arizona. No security footage, no witnesses. Just a child, alone, wearing nothing but a pink sweater and that necklace." Ethan's pulse thundered. Phoenix. He had scoured that area years ago, but no one had ever mentioned a child being found. She was transferred to the orphanage in Texas a year later, Brandon continued. Adopted briefly when she was 6, but the family returned her. After that, she bounced around the system until she aged out. Ethan swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. The idea of his daughter, if she really was Grace, growing up without a family, without him, was almost unbearable. "Get me everything," he said. "Every report, every document, every person who interacted with her. I want names, addresses, phone numbers." "I already sent you the files," Brandon said. "But Ethan, be careful with this. If she really is Grace, she doesn't know it. You drop this on her too fast, and you could push her away." Ethan knew that, but patience had never been his strong suit. That morning, instead of heading to the office, he drove straight to the hotel where the catering company was based. He had already made a call, ensuring Claire would be there, picking up her paycheck. When he arrived, she was stepping out of the back entrance, a brown envelope in her hand. She looked surprised when she saw him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You again?" she said, tilting her head. "You don't seem like the kind of guy who tracks down waitresses after parties." Ethan offered a small smile, though his heart was pounding. "I owe you an apology," he said smoothly. "I probably came off a little intense last night." Claire exhaled, rolling her eyes. "Yeah, you were staring at me like I was an alien or something. I wasn't expecting to see someone wearing that necklace," he admitted. "It caught me off guard." She hesitated again, glancing down at the pendant before looking back at him. "It's just a necklace. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything." The words hit him like a blow. "Maybe," he said, keeping his tone casual. "But humor me. How about a cup of coffee, my treat?" She studied him for a moment, clearly debating whether she should say yes. Then, with a sigh, she shrugged. "I guess one coffee won't kill me." Ethan felt a flicker of relief. "There's a cafe down the street. We can walk." She fell into step beside him, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Up close, he could see even more of Grace in her, the way she bit her lip when she was thinking, the way her hands fidgeted when she was nervous. Inside the cafe, they found a small corner booth, and Ethan ordered for both of them. Black coffee for himself, a vanilla latte for her. He had no idea what she liked, but something about her made him think of soft flavors, something warm and comforting. When the drinks arrived, Claire wrapped her hands around her cup, studying him. "So, tell me the real reason you wanted to meet up," she said. "Because I doubt it's just about my necklace." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "You said you don't remember much about your early childhood. Do you ever wonder where you came from? She hesitated. Of course, but there's not much I can do about it. What if there was? Claire frowned. What do you mean? I have connections, Ethan said carefully. If you wanted to look into your past, I could help you. She let out a short laugh. Why would you do that? Ethan chose his next words carefully. Let's just say I know what it's like to lose someone. Something in his tone made her pause. For a moment, she just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed. Look, I appreciate the offer, but I've made peace with my past, or, at least, as much as I can. Ethan's heart clenched. Even if there was a family out there looking for you. She stiffened slightly. I doubt that. If someone wanted me, they would have found me years ago. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that someone had been searching for her for 15 years, that he had never stopped looking, but he couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he leaned back, forcing a small smile. Well, the offer stands. No pressure. She stared at him for another long moment before nodding. Thanks, I guess. A part of Ethan wanted to press further, to push past the walls she had built. But he knew he had to be careful. One wrong move, and she could disappear from his life before he ever had the chance to tell her the truth. And that was something he couldn't risk. Ethan couldn't focus on anything else. For years, his life had been split between two realities. The one where he kept up appearances, played the role of the powerful and composed businessman, and the one where he was a father drowning in grief, haunted by the memory of his missing daughter. Now, those two realities were colliding, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. After his meeting with Claire at the cafe, he had spent the rest of the day locked in his study, poring over the files Brandon had sent. Each piece of information about Claire Evans felt like another thread tying her to Grace. Phoenix, Arizona, 3 years old, no memory of her past, a silver butterfly pendant. It was too much to ignore, but before he could take the next step, he needed to be absolutely sure, and that meant being careful. If Claire really was Grace, she had spent her entire life believing she was someone else. He couldn't just drop the truth on her like a bomb. He had to guide her toward it, let her uncover the pieces on her own. For now, he needed to keep her close. The next evening, he made sure to be at the restaurant where Claire worked. He arrived early, securing a table in the corner where he had a full view of the dining area. It didn't take long for him to spot her. She moved between the tables with practiced ease, balancing trays, taking orders, laughing softly at a customer's joke. She looked natural, comfortable. She looked happy. For a second, something inside Ethan twisted painfully. He had imagined his daughter growing up in pain, feeling lost and abandoned. But watching Claire, it became clear she had found a way to live, to survive. She deserved to know the truth, but she also deserved not to have her world shattered overnight. When she finally noticed him, her brows lifted slightly in surprise. Well, she said, approaching his table. You again? Ethan gave her an easy smile. You're starting to make me think I'm predictable. Claire smirked, pulling a small notepad from her apron. Either that, or you're stalking me. Would you believe me if I said it's just a coincidence? Not even a little, Ethan chuckled. He liked her. She had a sharpness to her, a quiet confidence. Grace had been like that too, fearless, even as a little girl. What can I get you? She asked, tapping her pen against the notepad. Surprise me, he said. Claire arched a brow. Dangerous choice. I like taking risks. She rolled her eyes but scribbled something down. All right, mystery man. One surprise meal coming up. As she walked away, Ethan exhaled slowly, watching her interact with the other customers. It was surreal. He had spent 15 years chasing ghosts, following false leads, hoping for a miracle. Now, she was standing right in front of him, but there was still one person he needed to deal with before he could move forward. Madison, his wife, his beautiful, elegant, deceptive wife, was starting to suspect something. That night, when he returned home, she was waiting for him in their bedroom, draped in silk, a glass of wine in her hand. You've been distracted, she said smoothly, running off in the middle of the night. Disappearing during the day, Ethan loosened his tie, watching her carefully. I've had a lot on my mind. Work. Something like that. Madison set her wine glass down on the nightstand and walked toward him, trailing her fingers along his chest. "You used to tell me everything," she murmured. "Now, I feel like there's a part of you I can't reach." Ethan caught her wrist gently, stopping her movements. "You're imagining things." She studied him, her expression unreadable. For years, Madison had been good at playing her part. The loving wife, the caring partner. But Ethan had always known there was something underneath, something he had chosen to ignore. Now, he was beginning to wonder just how deep that deception ran. "I don't like secrets, Ethan," she said softly. But there was an edge to her voice, a warning. Ethan let go of her wrist, stepping back. "Then maybe you should stop keeping them." For the first time, he saw something flicker in her eyes. Just for a second then, she smiled. "Whatever you're up to," she said lightly. "I hope it's worth it." Ethan held her gaze. "I hope so too." She kissed him on the cheek before walking into the bathroom, closing the door behind her. Ethan exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. He wasn't stupid. Madison was watching him now, and if she had anything to do with Grace's disappearance, she wouldn't let him get too close to the truth. The walls were closing in, but for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't afraid. He was ready for war. Ethan barely spoke to Madison the next morning. Their brief exchange over breakfast was polite, calculated, just enough to keep up appearances. He could feel her watching him, gauging his every move, but he didn't give her anything to hold on to. Not yet. Instead, he left the house early, making his way to his private office in downtown Los Angeles. He needed space, clarity. Most of all, he needed a plan. Brandon was already waiting for him when he arrived, sitting in one of the leather chairs across from Ethan's desk. The investigator was a man of few words, but the look on his face told Ethan everything he needed to know. "You found something," Ethan said. Shutting the door behind him, Brandon tossed a manila folder onto the desk. "More than something." Ethan sat down, flipping the folder open. Inside were scanned documents, old case reports, and a few grainy photographs. He scanned them quickly, his pulse steady, but his grip on the papers tightening. "This is the original police report from when Claire was found," Brandon said. "According to records, she was discovered near a gas station in Phoenix at around 3 a.m. No security cameras, no witnesses. She was wearing a pink sweater, a pair of sneakers, way too big for her feet, and that butterfly pendant." Ethan's jaw clenched. He could still picture Grace in that pink sweater. He remembered buying it for her on her 3rd birthday, how she had twirled around the living room, giggling, insisting it was her favorite color. He forced himself to focus. What about before Phoenix? Any gaps in the timeline? Brandon sighed, leaning back in his chair. "That's where it gets tricky. The official report says she was likely abandoned, but..." He hesitated. Ethan's eyes snapped up. "But what?" Brandon hesitated only a second before pulling out another document and sliding it across the desk. "I did some digging. I cross-referenced missing children's reports with known human trafficking routes." Ethan's stomach turned cold. Brandon tapped the page. "There's a pattern. Over the years, multiple children matching Grace's age and description went missing under similar circumstances. Some turned up in random locations, with no memory of how they got there. Others were never found." Ethan inhaled sharply, his fingers pressing against his temple. He had spent years searching, chasing every lead, every false hope. But this was something different. He looked at Brandon. "Are you saying Grace, Claire, was trafficked?" Brandon shook his head. "I don't know, but I'm saying it's a possibility. And if that's the case, whoever took her didn't just leave her in Phoenix by accident. They wanted her to disappear." Ethan's blood ran cold. He forced himself to remain calm, thinking, if someone had taken Grace that night, it meant she wasn't just lost. It meant she had been taken, and someone had made sure she was never found. And Madison had always been the one thing that didn't add up. His grip tightened on the papers. He had been willing to believe she was simply careless, a selfish woman too wrapped up in her own vanity to be a good stepmother. But what if it was worse than that? What if she had known something all along? Brandon studied him. "You think she's involved, don't you?" Ethan exhaled slowly, setting the papers down. "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." He stood, grabbing his jacket. "I need to see Claire." Brandon nodded. "Be careful, Ethan. If Madison catches on..." "She already has," Ethan said. And that's what worries me. Claire was behind the bar at the restaurant when Ethan arrived, carefully arranging glasses on a shelf. She looked up when she saw him, a small frown forming on her lips. "You again," she said, but there was no real annoyance in her tone. Ethan took a seat at the bar. "I told you, I like taking risks," Claire snorted. "Yeah, well, at this rate, I'm going to start charging you rent for how often you show up here." Ethan smirked. "I'll consider it." She finished organizing the glasses, then leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "All right, mystery man. What's the deal? You keep showing up, asking questions about my past. What's your angle?" Ethan considered his words carefully. He couldn't tell her everything. Not yet. "I told you before. I know what it's like to lose someone," he said, meeting her gaze. "I guess I just see something familiar in you." Claire studied him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, he wondered if she would push him away. Then, to his surprise, she sighed. "You know, it's funny. I never really cared about where I came from. Not in the way some people do. But ever since I met you, I don't know. It's like you're making me question things I thought I had let go of." Ethan's heart pounded. This was it. The first crack in the wall she had built around herself. "I can help you find answers," he said softly. "If you want them." Claire hesitated, biting her lip. Then slowly, she nodded. "Okay." Ethan's chest tightened. It was only one word, but it was enough. He wasn't just chasing a ghost anymore. For the first time in 15 years, he was bringing his daughter home. Ethan hadn't felt this kind of hope in years. As he drove back from the restaurant, the weight in his chest felt different. Not gone, but shifting. Claire had agreed to let him help her, to look into her past. It was a small victory, but an important one. Yet, beneath the cautious optimism, there was something else, a shadow creeping in, whispering that things weren't going to be that easy. Because if Claire was Grace, then someone had worked hard to keep her hidden. And that meant they wouldn't let her be found without a fight. Back at his mansion, Ethan stepped inside and immediately felt the air change. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Madison was waiting for him. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, dressed in a silk robe, her blonde hair falling in loose waves over her shoulders. In the dim light, she looked almost ethereal. Almost, "I thought you had a late meeting," she said, swirling the wine in her glass without looking at him. Ethan removed his jacket, setting it on the armrest of a chair. "I did." She turned, watching him carefully. "Then why do I get the feeling you were somewhere else?" He met her gaze without flinching. "You tell me." Her lips curled into a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've been different lately," she mused. Distant, preoccupied. She took a slow sip of her wine. "Should I be worried?" Ethan walked to the bar, pouring himself a drink. He needed to keep his cool, play the game. Madison thrived on control, on manipulation. If she even suspected that he was onto something, she would find a way to derail him. "You worry too much," he said simply, taking a sip of his whiskey. She let out a soft laugh. "Well, can you blame me? My husband disappears for hours, barely talks to me, and looks like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders." Ethan leaned against the bar, watching her. "Maybe I am." Madison tilted her head. "Is that so?" There was a challenge in her voice, a warning. For years, she had played the role of the perfect wife, slipping effortlessly between charm and ice. But Ethan knew better now. He saw through her act, and he was done playing along. "Tell me something," he said, setting his glass down. "Do you ever think about Grace?" A beat of silence. Then, for just a fraction of a second, something flickered in her expression. Then it was gone. Madison sighed, shaking her head. "Ethan, why are we doing this?" "Doing what?" "Dragging up ghosts." Her voice softened. The perfect balance of sympathy and exasperation. "You know I loved Grace. Losing her was the worst thing that ever happened to us. The worst thing that ever happened to us. Not to her, not to Grace." Ethan stared at her, his jaw tightening. She had practiced this speech, refined it over the years, always knowing exactly what to say, and for a long time, he had let himself believe her. But now he wasn't sure how he had ever been blind to it. "I just wonder," he said, keeping his tone light, "if we ever missed something?" Madison stilled. "Missed something?" she echoed, her fingers tightening slightly around her glass. You know, a detail, something we overlooked. He shrugged. It wouldn't hurt to go back over it. For the first time, he saw it. Real tension in her posture. It was slight, but it was there. And that was all the confirmation he needed. Madison let out a small laugh, shaking her head. Ethan, it's been 15 years. She took a step toward him, resting a hand on his arm. You have to stop torturing yourself. Ethan forced himself to stay still, to not react, because right now, all he wanted to do was rip his arm away and demand the truth. Instead, he nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. Madison smiled, her grip tightening slightly before she pulled away. Of course I am. She kissed his cheek, then sauntered out of the room, her robe flowing behind her. Ethan waited until he heard the bedroom door click shut. Then he exhaled, his hands clenching into fists. Madison had just made her first mistake. She had panicked for the first time. And now, he knew with absolute certainty that she was hiding something. The next morning, Ethan met Brandon at a private office downtown. He had barely slept, his mind racing, piecing things together. Brandon wasted no time. He slid another folder across the table, this one much thinner than the last. This is everything I could find on Madison from around the time Grace disappeared, he said. Most of it is clean, too clean, but I did find something interesting. Ethan opened the folder, scanning the documents. Then he saw it, a bank transfer, a large sum of money withdrawn from Madison's personal account. The date, 1 week before Grace disappeared. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. She paid someone, he murmured. Brandon nodded grimly. That's what it looks like. Ethan clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening around the paper. For 15 years, he had lived in the dark. For 15 years, he had blamed himself. But now he was done being blind. It was time to bring the truth into the light. Ethan sat in his office, gripping the paper so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The bank transfer, Madison's transfer, stared back at him, a silent confirmation of what he had begun to suspect. She had paid someone, and a week later, Grace had disappeared. The air in the room felt suffocating, heavy with the weight of the truth slowly unraveling before him. Brandon leaned back in his chair, watching him carefully. I ran the transaction through multiple checks. It was a cash withdrawal. No record of where the money went after that. Ethan exhaled sharply, setting the paper down. He rubbed his temples, trying to think. You're telling me there's no trace? No account it was funneled into. Brandon shook his head. Nope. That money vanished the second she pulled it. He hesitated. But Ethan, I don't think this was some random extortion or blackmail situation. If it were, someone would have surfaced years ago, trying to squeeze more out of her. Ethan already knew that. No, this wasn't about someone blackmailing Madison. This was about Madison hiring someone. And if that was true, then the woman he had once trusted with his life had orchestrated something far worse than he had imagined. Ethan inhaled deeply, forcing himself to stay calm. We need to figure out who she paid. Brandon nodded. I'm working on it, but Ethan, this is dangerous ground. Madison isn't stupid if she catches wind of what you're doing. I don't care, Ethan interrupted, his voice steel. I've spent 15 years thinking I lost my daughter. 15 years tearing myself apart over something that never made sense. He met Brandon's gaze. I don't care what it takes. I will find out what happened to Grace. Brandon studied him for a long moment before nodding. All right, then let's do this right. That night, Ethan barely set foot in his own house. He couldn't stand to be near Madison, couldn't stomach another fake smile, another lingering kiss that meant nothing. Instead, he drove through the city, trying to piece together a plan. And somehow, he ended up outside Claire's apartment. He wasn't even sure why he had come. Maybe it was because she was the only real thing in his life right now. Maybe it was because, deep down, he knew she was Grace. After a brief hesitation, he got out of the car. Her building wasn't much, a modest complex in a quieter part of town. He made his way to her door, pausing before knocking. Moments later, it opened. Claire stood there, looking surprised. She was dressed casually, sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, and for a second she looked so young, so familiar that Ethan's chest ached. Hi, she said, tilting her head. You stalking me now? Ethan managed a small smile. I was in the area. Claire gave him a look. Uh-huh, and I'm a billionaire. He let out a quiet chuckle, then hesitated. Can I come in? She studied him for a moment before stepping aside. Yeah, sure. But if you're secretly a serial killer, just know I keep a bat by the door. He chuckled again, stepping inside. Noted. Her apartment was small but cozy. There were books stacked on the coffee table, a half-empty cup of tea by the couch, and a faint scent of vanilla lingering in the air. She motioned for him to sit, then folded her arms. All right, mystery man. Spill. What's going on? Ethan ran a hand through his hair, debating how much to say. Remember when I told you I could help you find answers about your past? She nodded slowly. Well, I might have found something. Claire's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Ethan exhaled. The night you were found in Phoenix. It wasn't random. Claire blinked. What? You weren't just abandoned. Someone made sure you disappeared. Her expression darkened, confusion flickering in her eyes. That doesn't make any sense. She shook her head. I was a kid. I barely remember anything from before the orphanage. Ethan hesitated, then carefully pulled out his phone, showing her the scanned copy of the police report from Phoenix. She took the phone, eyes scanning the words. A child, approximately 3 years old, found alone near a gas station at 3:12 a.m. No identification except for a silver butterfly pendant. She inhaled sharply. Her fingers brushed against the screen, lingering on the words. This is, she whispered. This is real. Yes. She looked up at him, something unreadable in her expression. Why are you showing me this? Ethan swallowed. Because I think someone wanted to erase your past. She let out a breath, shaking her head. This is insane. Who would even do something like that? Ethan studied her, his chest tight with the weight of the truth. He could have said it, could have told her everything. That his wife, Madison, might have orchestrated her disappearance, that he had spent 15 years mourning her, only to realize she might have been alive all this time. But it was too soon. She wasn't ready. So instead, he leaned forward, keeping his voice calm. I don't know yet, but if you let me, I'm going to find out. Claire stared at him, her fingers still curled around the phone. Then, after a long pause, she nodded. Okay, she said quietly. I want to know. Ethan exhaled, relief washing over him. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And now, there was no turning back. Claire barely slept that night. After Ethan left, she sat on her couch, staring at the police report on his phone, her thoughts tangled in a web of confusion and disbelief. She had spent her entire life thinking she was just unwanted, that someone had left her behind, tossed her away like she was nothing. But now, Ethan was telling her that wasn't true, that someone had made her disappear, that someone had erased her past. She ran a shaky hand through her hair, exhaling sharply. This was insane. It had to be. And yet, something inside her whispered that it wasn't, because for as long as she could remember, there had been fragments, flickers of things she couldn't explain, memories that didn't feel like memories, just flashes of something buried deep inside her, the sound of laughter, a voice calling her name, the scent of something warm and familiar, like vanilla and cedar wood. She had never been able to place them, and over the years, she had stopped trying. But now, those fragments felt like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed. Her fingers brushed over the butterfly pendant resting against her collarbone, the only thing she had from before. What if Ethan was right? What if her past wasn't what she thought it was? What if she wasn't Claire Evans at all? The thought sent a cold shiver down her spine. She needed answers, and she was starting to think Ethan Blake was the only person who could help her find them. The next morning, Claire barely touched her coffee as she sat in the corner of a small diner, waiting. Ethan had texted her that morning, asking if she was still sure about looking into her past. Her response had been instant. Yes. Now, as she sat there, tapping her fingers against the table, she wondered if she had made a mistake, because no matter what she found, there was no going back. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up just as Ethan walked in. He spotted her immediately, making his way to the booth. He slid into the seat across from her. Morning. Claire forced a small smile. Morning. Ethan signaled the waitress. ordering black coffee for himself and another for Claire. Though hers was already half full, once the waitress left, he leaned forward slightly. "Are you okay?" Claire hesitated, then let out a dry laugh. "I mean, define okay." Ethan gave a knowing nod. "Yeah, I get it," she exhaled, wrapping her hands around her mug. "I guess I'm just overwhelmed. I spent my whole life thinking I was just another abandoned kid, that my parents didn't want me." She swallowed. "But now you're telling me that's not what happened, that someone took me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't think they just took you. I think they wanted to make sure you were never found." Claire stared at him. "Why?" Ethan hesitated. "That's what we're going to find out." For a moment, she just looked at him. The intensity in his eyes was almost overwhelming, like this wasn't just about her past, but his as well, like he was searching for something too. She finally nodded. "Okay, what's the next step?" Ethan pulled a file from his coat and slid it across the table. "Brandon, my investigator, managed to track down the orphanage you were placed in. The records are incomplete, but there are a few people who might remember something." Claire opened the file, scanning the documents inside. Old yellowed papers, a few handwritten notes, and then a name, Eleanor Hayes. Claire frowned. "Who's this?" She was one of the caregivers at the orphanage, retired now, but she worked there for decades. If anyone remembers something about how you got there, it's her. Claire stared at the name, her fingers tightening slightly around the paper. This was it, the first real lead she had ever had. She looked up at Ethan. "Where is she now?" Ethan met her gaze. "Austin." Claire inhaled deeply. Austin, the place she had lived most of her life, the place she thought she had known. But maybe, just maybe, she had never really known it at all. She squared her shoulders. "Then let's go to Austin." 2 days later, they were on a plane. Ethan had arranged everything. First-class seats, a car waiting for them when they landed. Claire wasn't used to this. The luxury, the way things just happened because someone had the power to make them happen. But right now, she wasn't in the mood to argue. She just wanted answers. The drive from the airport to the retirement home was quiet. Ethan kept glancing at her, like he was making sure she wasn't about to change her mind. She wasn't. When they finally arrived, Claire felt her stomach twist as they walked through the entrance of the small, peaceful facility. The woman at the front desk gave them a warm smile. "Can I help you?" Ethan stepped forward. "We're here to see Eleanor Hayes." The woman nodded. "One moment." Claire's fingers twitched as she waited. Her pulse felt too fast, her thoughts racing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, a nurse wheeled an elderly woman into the sitting area. Eleanor Hayes was frail but sharp-eyed. Her gray hair was pulled back into a bun, and there was something in her gaze that felt knowing. She studied Claire for a long moment before finally speaking. "Well, I'll be damned," she murmured. "You came back." Claire's breath caught in her throat. Ethan stiffened beside her. "You recognize her?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "Of course I do." Claire felt her heart pound against her ribs. "Then tell me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor's gaze softened. "Child, I don't know who you were before you got to that orphanage, but I know for damn sure you weren't meant to be there." Claire's world tilted, because she had expected maybes, half answers, uncertainty. But this was something else, Eleanor knew. And suddenly, Claire was no longer just a girl searching for answers. She was someone with a past that was about to come crashing back into her life. Claire's heart pounded as she stared at Eleanor Hayes, her words still hanging in the air. "I know for damn sure you weren't meant to be there." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. It was as if everything around her had blurred, leaving only the frail woman sitting in front of her and the weight of the truth she had just implied. Ethan sat beside Claire, his expression unreadable, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. Claire swallowed hard. "What do you mean by that?" Eleanor studied her for a moment, before leaning forward slightly in her wheelchair. "I remember the night you arrived at the orphanage, clear as day. They told us you'd been abandoned in Phoenix. But," she shook her head, "I never bought that story." Claire's throat tightened. "Why?" The older woman exhaled, her fingers gripping the armrests of her chair. "Because the woman who dropped you off, she wasn't some scared, desperate mother. She was cold, calculated, like she was just getting rid of something she didn't need anymore. Ethan leaned forward. "You saw her." His voice was calm, but Claire could hear the tension beneath it. Eleanor nodded slowly. Not her face. It was late, and she kept to the shadows, but I remember her voice. Claire felt her stomach twist. What did she say? Eleanor hesitated, as if weighing whether she should tell them. Then with a sigh, she answered, "Make sure she disappears." Claire sucked in a sharp breath. Ethan's fingers curled into fists. "She actually said that." Eleanor nodded. Plain as day. Claire felt the floor beneath her shift. Make sure she disappears. This wasn't abandonment. This wasn't some mother unable to care for her child. This was intentional. Someone had made sure she vanished. And now, Claire needed to know who. Her voice came out hoarse. "Do you remember anything else? Anything at all?" Eleanor's brow furrowed in thought. There was one thing. She glanced at Ethan. She wasn't alone. There was a man with her. He stayed by the car. Didn't say much, but when she handed me the child, he was the one who gave me an envelope. Ethan tensed. "An envelope?" Eleanor nodded. "Money. A lot of it." Claire's stomach turned. "They paid you." "Not me, sweetheart," Eleanor said gently. "The orphanage director. It was hush money, the kind that made sure nobody asked any questions." Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. Claire barely breathed. She had been bought off. Just another transaction. She clenched her jaw. "Do you remember what they looked like? Anything at all?" Eleanor hesitated. "Like I said, I couldn't see much, but..." She paused, then added, "The woman, she was elegant. Not the type you'd expect in a place like that. She had a presence." Claire's pulse quickened. "Elegant how?" Eleanor pursed her lips. "Like money. Like she didn't belong anywhere near a rundown orphanage." Ethan was deadly silent. Claire turned to look at him, and for the first time, she saw it. Certainty in his eyes. He knew. "Ethan," she said carefully. "What is it?" His jaw tightened. He was gripping the edge of his chair so hard his knuckles were white. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but laced with fury. "I think I know who she is." Claire's breath caught. Eleanor frowned, glancing between them. "You do?" Ethan nodded, his expression dark. "Did the woman have blonde hair?" Eleanor blinked in surprise. "Yeah, I think she did. Why?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "Because I know her." Claire felt the room tilt. "Who is she?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes full of something she couldn't quite name, and then, finally, he said it. "Madison. My wife." Claire's blood ran cold. She stared at him, barely able to process what he had just said. "Your wife," she echoed. Ethan nodded once. "If what Eleanor is saying is true, then Madison was the one who made you disappear." Claire shook her head, trying to grasp the enormity of what he was saying. "But why, what would she have to gain from that?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "Because Madison never wanted Grace in my life." The words sent a chill down Claire's spine. This wasn't just about a missing child. This was personal. Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. "So you think I'm Grace?" Ethan met her gaze. "Yes." The world spun. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to tell him he was wrong. But deep down, she knew he wasn't. The flashes of memories she had ignored all her life. The way Ethan looked at her like she was someone he had been searching for forever. The way her entire existence had been erased before she could even remember who she was. It all made sense. But before she could say anything, Eleanor spoke again. "There's something else," she murmured. Claire turned back to her, barely able to breathe. "What?" Eleanor's gaze was sharp now. "The night you arrived, you weren't crying." Claire frowned. "What?" Eleanor's eyes locked onto hers. "You were silent. Most kids would be scared, screaming, but you just stared at me, like you knew something was wrong, but you couldn't say it." Claire swallowed hard, her heart racing, and then Eleanor said something that made her entire body go cold. "You had a bruise on your wrist," she murmured. Like someone had grabbed you too hard." The words hit Claire like a slap. She didn't remember that, but suddenly, she felt it. A phantom pain, a whisper of something she had buried deep inside her mind. Someone had held her too tight. Someone had taken her, erased her, and left her in the dark, and now, She was going to bring that truth into the light. The drive back from the retirement home was silent. Claire sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window. Her fingers curled tightly around the butterfly pendant at her neck. Her mind was a storm, emotions crashing against each other so violently that she felt like she couldn't breathe. Madison, Ethan's wife, the woman who had been by his side all these years, the woman who had smiled at him, played the perfect role while hiding the darkest possible secret, the woman who had made Claire disappear. She still couldn't wrap her head around it, couldn't accept it, and yet, the puzzle pieces fit too well. Madison, elegant and cold, handing her over in the dead of night, the money, the deliberate erasure of her past. Claire squeezed her eyes shut. She felt sick. Ethan hadn't said a word since they left. His grip on the steering wheel was ironclad, his jaw clenched so tight she thought it might snap. The tension in the car was suffocating. Finally, Claire couldn't take it anymore. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He exhaled sharply through his nose, gripping the wheel even tighter. "Find out the rest of the truth," he said, his voice low. "Dangerous. And then I'll make sure Madison never hurts anyone again." Claire's pulse spiked. There was violence in his tone, and she wasn't sure if it scared her or if she wanted him to follow through, because the more she thought about it, the more she realized how much Madison had stolen from her. Her family, her childhood, her entire damn identity, and Madison had never been caught. She had continued living in luxury, as if none of it ever happened. Claire's fingers curled into fists. "We need proof," she said, forcing herself to think logically. "Real proof. If we go after her without it, she'll find a way to twist the story. She's been doing it for 15 years. Ethan nodded, his expression still dark. "Brandon's working on it." Claire let out a slow breath. "Then we need to act like we don't know anything, at least for now." Ethan's jaw flexed. She could tell the idea of pretending made him furious. But after a long moment, he nodded again. "You're right," he admitted. "We need to be careful." Claire swallowed, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. They were going back to Los Angeles, back to the woman who had destroyed both of their lives. And this time, Claire wasn't going anywhere. 3 days later, Claire stood in front of Ethan's Malibu mansion, staring up at the place where her life had begun and ended 15 years ago. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wasn't sure what she had expected, but standing there, breathing in the salty ocean air, she felt familiarity. Like a song she hadn't heard in years but still somehow knew the words to. Ethan was standing beside her, silent, letting her process. "Do you remember anything?" he asked finally. Claire hesitated. "I don't know, maybe. Flashes, hallways, a staircase, but nothing solid, just echoes." Ethan exhaled. "Take your time." But they both knew they didn't have much, because Madison was inside, and they were about to walk straight into the lion's den. The moment Claire stepped into the house, her body reacted before her mind did. A shiver ran down her spine. It was too much, too big, too cold, and yet, it felt like something. A memory trying to force itself out of the darkness. She barely had time to process it before a voice rang out. Well. Madison. Claire turned sharply, her pulse spiking as the woman stepped into view. She was beautiful, effortlessly elegant in an emerald green dress, a glass of red wine in one manicured hand. But her eyes were calculating, and the moment they landed on Claire, something flickered there, something dangerous. "You must be Claire," Madison said, smiling like a serpent. "Ethan has told me so much about you." Claire's nails dug into her palms. She knows, maybe not everything, but she knows enough. And suddenly, it wasn't just tension in the room, it was war. Ethan stepped forward, his presence solid beside Claire. "Claire's staying here for a while," he said smoothly, his voice betraying nothing. Madison arched a perfectly sculpted brow. "Oh," Ethan nodded. "She's looking into her past." Madison took a slow sip of her wine. How fascinating. Claire felt sick, because this woman had stolen her life, and she was standing there smiling. Claire forced herself to meet Madison's gaze. "I think I was here before," she said casually. "A long time ago." Madison's grip on her wine glass tightened, just slightly. Then she laughed softly. "Is that so?" Claire tilted her head. "It's strange, isn't it? How memories have a way of coming back when you least expect them." For the first time, Madison's smile faltered. Just a little, just enough. But Claire saw it, and she knew. Madison was scared. Good, because this time, Claire wasn't the one running. That night, Claire stood by the large windows in one of the guest rooms, staring out at the ocean. Her body buzzed with adrenaline, with rage, with something she couldn't name. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his presence grounding her. "How are you holding up?" Claire exhaled. "She's scared." Ethan nodded. "Yeah." Claire turned to face him. "Then we're winning." Ethan's lips twitched slightly, but his expression was still tense. "We need to be careful," he reminded her. Claire knew that, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. For the first time, she was fighting back. And no matter what Madison tried to do, she wasn't going to lose again. Claire knew Madison was watching her. From the moment she stepped into the house, she could feel it. Eyes on her, assessing, calculating. Madison was too poised to be careless, too cunning to act without precision. But Claire had caught the flicker of unease in her eyes earlier. And that meant one thing: she was getting to her. She had spent years avoiding questions about her past, dismissing the nagging doubts in the back of her mind. But now, every instinct inside her was screaming. She was in danger. The only question was when Madison would make her move, and Claire wasn't going to sit around and wait for it to happen. That night, Claire barely slept. Every sound in the massive house felt amplified. Every creak of the wooden floors, every distant whisper of the ocean outside. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts circling like a storm. At some point, exhaustion took over. Her eyelids grew heavy, her body sinking into the plush mattress. And that's when the nightmare came. It wasn't like her usual dreams, fragmented, blurry. This one was sharp. She was small, a child, wrapped in a pink sweater. Someone was holding her wrist, tight, too tight. She could feel the pressure, the bruising grip. "Shh," a voice whispered. "Be a good girl." She knew that voice. It sent a shock of cold terror through her even as she tried to see the person's face. But before she could, there was a blur of movement, the rush of night air, and then falling. The sensation yanked her awake. Claire sat up with a gasp, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her skin was clammy, her pulse erratic. She pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to catch her breath. It was just a dream, Her fingers froze. Her wrist, the same wrist from her nightmare, was sore. Her stomach dropped. Shoving back the covers, she scrambled out of bed and hurried into the bathroom. She flicked on the light, bracing herself against the sink as she turned her wrist. A faint bruise was forming, right where she had felt the grip in her dream. A tremor went through her. She didn't bruise easily, which meant it hadn't just been a dream. Someone had touched her. Someone had grabbed her wrist while she was sleeping. A chill raced down her spine. Her gaze snapped to the door, her breath shallow. The room was silent. The house was silent, but she wasn't alone. Claire forced herself to think, to act. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and sent a text. "Claire, come to my room now." Seconds later, her door opened, and Ethan stepped inside, his expression sharp. "What's wrong?" Claire turned her wrist toward him. "This." Ethan's eyes darkened. "Who did that?" Claire swallowed. "I don't know, but it happened while I was asleep." Ethan's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, his fingers barely brushing the bruise before he exhaled sharply. "We're not safe here," he muttered. Claire nodded. "I know." Ethan looked at her, his eyes searching. "Are you okay?" She was shaken, but fear wasn't going to help her now, so she lifted her chin. "I'm fine, but we need to do something." Ethan's expression hardened. "We will." And for the first time, Claire saw it, the full weight of his rage. If Madison thought she could keep playing her games, she had severely underestimated him. The next morning, Madison was waiting at breakfast. She sat at the head of the table, poised as always, sipping her coffee like she hadn't orchestrated Claire's disappearance years ago. Claire had spent all night thinking about what to do, how to act. But now, Seeing her sitting there so calmly, Claire felt something inside her ignite. She wasn't going to pretend anymore. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, locking eyes with Madison. "Someone was in my room last night," Claire said smoothly, watching for any reaction. Madison barely blinked. "Oh, I woke up with bruises." Madison set her coffee cup down gently. How strange. Ethan walked in then, his presence heavy, his expression unreadable. He moved to stand behind Claire, solid, unwavering. Claire tilted her head. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" A slow smile spread across Madison's lips. "Oh, darling." She leaned forward slightly. "If I wanted to hurt you, you'd know it." The air crackled between them. Ethan's fingers curled into fists. Claire's blood ran cold, because there it was, a confession without being a confession. Madison knew, and she was warning her. A cold, simmering rage filled Claire's chest. She wasn't a scared little girl anymore. She was here. She wasn't leaving, and Madison had no idea who she was dealing with. Claire slowly pushed back her chair, standing up. "I hope you're ready for this," she said quietly. Madison's smile didn't falter. "Oh, sweetheart, I was born ready." Ethan grabbed Claire's arm before she could say anything else. "Come on," he murmured. She let him lead her out of the room, but her pulse was hammering because this wasn't just a fight anymore. It was war, and only one of them was going to win. Ethan could feel Claire trembling with rage as he led her out of the dining room, but she didn't fight him. Not yet. Once they were down the hallway, away from Madison's prying eyes, he turned to her. "We have to be smart about this." Claire let out a sharp breath, running a hand through her hair. "I know," but her voice was tight, edged with frustration. "She's playing with us, Ethan. She wants me to know she's in control." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Then we take that control away." Claire met his gaze, something dark flickering behind her eyes. "How?" Ethan glanced around, ensuring no one was listening. "Oh, Brandon's still digging. We need something solid, something that ties her directly to what happened 15 years ago." Claire crossed her arms. "And what if she covers her tracks before we get it?" Ethan hesitated. "Then we push her until she makes a mistake." Claire exhaled slowly, nodding. "All right." But there was a dangerous glint in her eyes now, a resolve that hadn't been there before. She wasn't just looking for the truth anymore. She was out for justice, or revenge, and Ethan wasn't sure he could stop her. That afternoon, Claire wandered the mansion, letting the ghosts of her past find her. She moved through the grand hallways, her fingers grazing the cold marble walls, her heartbeat quickening every time something felt too familiar. She didn't have full memories, but she had sensations. The way the afternoon light hit the floor near the library, the faint scent of roses from the garden outside, the distant sound of waves crashing, lulling her into a strange, almost nostalgic daze. "I've been here before." She stepped into the library, her eyes scanning the shelves. Something about this room made her stomach twist. And then, a flash, a memory. She was small, curled up in a leather armchair. Someone was reading to her, a deep voice. Her father, Ethan. Her fingers twitched. She took a slow breath, trying to force the memory to stay, but it was like grasping at mist. It slipped away too fast. Frustration surged inside her. She turned to leave, and froze. Madison stood in the doorway. Watching her, Claire's heart jumped, but she forced herself to remain still, unafraid. Madison tilted her head. "You look so at home here." Claire's pulse pounded, but she forced a smirk. "Maybe I was." Madison's smile was slow, calculated. "Memories are a tricky thing, darling. Sometimes they're just stories we tell ourselves." Claire met her gaze, refusing to back down. "And sometimes they're the truth coming back to haunt the people who tried to bury them." Madison's eyes darkened, but her expression remained perfectly poised. Then slowly, she stepped into the room, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "You're a very interesting girl." "Claire," she mused. "So bold. So fearless." Claire didn't move as Madison circled her, like a predator studying its prey. "But you see," Madison continued, her voice soft, almost gentle, "you're playing a game you don't understand." Claire clenched her fists. "Enlighten me." Madison smiled. "Power is won through patience. Not reckless moves, And right now, you're standing in a house that isn't yours, pushing against someone who has already won. Claire's throat tightened, but she didn't let her fear show. You haven't won anything yet. Madison leaned in slightly. Haven't I? For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Madison stepped back, brushing imaginary dust off her sleeve. You should be careful, dear. Her voice was light, almost amused. Things tend to happen to people who don't know their place. Claire's blood boiled. She wanted to lunge at her, to make her pay for every stolen year. But she forced herself to smile. I guess we'll see who really wins in the end. Madison studied her for another second, then chuckled. Oh, darling, she murmured, turning toward the door. I already know. And then she was gone. Claire let out a slow breath, forcing her heartbeat to steady. Madison was trying to scare her, to make her feel small. But Claire wasn't a child anymore, and this wasn't over, not even close. Later that evening, Ethan found Claire standing on the balcony, staring at the ocean. He knew that look. She was barely holding herself together. You okay? He asked, stepping beside her. Claire didn't answer immediately. She exhaled, her shoulders tight. She threatened me. Ethan's hands fisted at his sides. What did she say? Claire let out a humorless laugh. That I don't know what game I'm playing. That she's already won. She turned to face him. And maybe she's right. Ethan grabbed her wrist gently, his thumb brushing over the fading bruise. No, he said firmly. She's not right. Claire met his gaze, something raw in her eyes. Then tell me how we beat her. Ethan exhaled sharply. We take her power away. Claire swallowed. How? Ethan hesitated. Then his expression hardened. We make sure she has nowhere to hide. Claire stared at him. What does that mean? Ethan's voice was cold, certain. We expose her. Publicly. We don't just prove what she did. We make sure everyone knows it. Claire's breath caught. That was dangerous. That was war. But as she thought about everything Madison had done, everything she had stolen, Claire realized she didn't care. She wanted justice. She wanted Madison to burn. So she nodded. Let's do it. Ethan held her gaze. Are you sure? Claire's voice was steady. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Ethan exhaled, nodding. Then let's end this. And just like that, the war had begun. The plan was simple. Ruthless. And, if executed correctly, devastating. Ethan and Claire sat in his study, the weight of what they were about to do settling in the space between them. Papers were spread across the desk. Financial records, property deeds, old photos, evidence. They weren't just gathering proof anymore. They were building a trap. Ethan tapped a file with 2 fingers. Madison has built her entire life on perception, power, influence. The moment we take that away, she's nothing. Claire leaned forward, scanning the pages. So we hit her where it hurts first. Her reputation. Ethan nodded. She has deep connections in this city. We need to be smart. If we go after her too soon, she'll crush us before we have a chance to land a real blow. Claire's jaw tightened. So, what's the first move? Ethan pulled out a USB drive. This. Claire arched a brow. What's on it? Financial transactions, bank records, proof that Madison made a significant withdrawal the week you disappeared. She tried to hide it, but Brandon found the buried records. Claire's pulse quickened. That's enough to make people ask questions. Ethan smirked. Exactly, and once doubt spreads, she won't be able to control the narrative. Claire nodded. So how do we release it? Ethan leaned back in his chair. We leak it anonymously. A well-placed journalist, someone hungry for a scandal. Madison has enemies, powerful ones. They'll do most of the work for us. Claire's lips curled into a dangerous smile. I like the way you think. Ethan met her gaze, something dark flashing in his eyes. We're not playing fair. Madison never did. Claire exhaled, steadying herself. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. And Madison had no idea what was coming. The leak happened faster than expected. By mid-afternoon, an independent journalist had picked up the story. By evening, it was circulating in business circles. Anonymous source reveals suspicious transactions linked to Madison Blake. Questions rise over missing funds in one of Los Angeles' most powerful families. And then, the headline that changed everything. Could Madison Blake be hiding a darker secret? Claire read the articles on her phone. her hands steady but her heart racing. Ethan stood beside her, watching the news unfold on a widescreen TV in his office. "We just set fire to her entire world," Claire murmured. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line, and she's about to fight back. That night, the first blow came. Ethan's phone rang. Madison's name flashed across the screen. He answered without hesitation. "Ethan," she said, her voice sharp, seething beneath the surface. "I assume you've seen the news?" Ethan leaned against his desk, his expression unreadable. "I have." A slow inhale. "And I assume you're behind it." Ethan let the silence stretch. Then, a smirk. "Do you really want me to answer that?" A pause. Then, Madison's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "Actually, Madison, I think I do." Another pause. Then, a soft chuckle. "You always were predictable," she mused. "But I have to admit this is impressive. I didn't think you had it in you." Ethan's expression darkened. "I had no choice." Silence then. Finally, Madison sighed. "I was hoping we could avoid this, Ethan." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Avoid what?" "The end of our little game." The line went dead. Ethan lowered the phone slowly, his chest tight. Claire was watching him, her eyes sharp. What did she say? Ethan exhaled, his expression grim. "She's making her next move." They didn't have to wait long. An hour later, a news alert flashed on Ethan's phone. His stomach dropped as he read the headline. "Breaking: Madison Blake accuses husband of fraud and domestic abuse." Claire froze. "What?" Ethan clenched his jaw. Scrolling through the article, Madison had gone on record, playing the victim, claiming Ethan had been emotionally unstable since Grace's disappearance, that he had grown paranoid, obsessing over conspiracy theories about their daughter's fate. And the worst part, she had evidence. Bank transfers that looked like Ethan had been moving money to bribe investigators. Emails that had been doctored to make it seem like he had been threatening her. Claire's blood turned to ice. "She's trying to bury you before you can bury her." Ethan slammed his phone down on the desk. "She just declared war." Claire swallowed, her mind racing. Madison was powerful, connected. And now, she had flipped the narrative. If they weren't careful, everything they had built would collapse before they had a chance to expose her. Claire inhaled sharply. "What do we do now?" Ethan met her gaze. His expression was lethal. "We hit her harder." Claire nodded. "Then let's end this." Ethan stood in his study, gripping the edges of his desk so tightly his knuckles turned white. The room was dimly lit, the glow from his computer screen illuminating the chaos unfolding before him. Madison's fabricated accusations had taken over every news outlet. Madison Blake speaks out. "I lived in fear for years." Exclusive. The dark truth behind Ethan Blake's obsession with his missing daughter. Every article painted him as a dangerous man unraveling at the seams. A grieving father who had lost control, desperate to create an enemy where there was none. She had framed him as unhinged. A man willing to destroy everything, including his wife, just to keep his delusions alive. Claire sat across from him, staring at the screen in stunned silence. "She's good," Claire admitted, her voice tight with frustration. "She made herself the victim. People are eating it up." Ethan let out a slow breath, his pulse hammering in his ears. "She planned this. She knew exactly how to twist the story before we even had the chance to expose her." Claire clenched her fists. "So what do we do?" Ethan's gaze darkened. "We push her past her limits." Claire frowned. "How?" He exhaled sharply, his mind racing. "Right now she's in control. She's dictating the narrative. But there's one thing Madison has never been able to resist. Her own arrogance." Claire's brows furrowed. "You think she'll slip?" Ethan nodded. "She always does. She thrives on power. But if we make her feel truly threatened, she'll stop playing smart and start playing reckless." Claire exhaled, processing the strategy. "And once she gets reckless, she'll make a mistake." Ethan's lips curled slightly. "Exactly." Claire leaned forward, determination flickering in her eyes. "Then let's make her feel trapped." Ethan picked up his phone. Time to set the final stage. The first step was forcing Madison into a corner. Ethan made a single phone call. To his lawyer, James Holloway. "Madison's making her move," Ethan said the second James picked up. "I need to file for divorce immediately." James was silent for a beat. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," James sighed. "All right, I'll get the paperwork drafted by the morning, but Ethan, be ready. This will set her off." Ethan's jaw clenched. "That's exactly what I need." After hanging up, he turned to Claire. "Step 1, she loses me." Claire nodded. "And step 2, Ethan's gaze was cold. We take everything else from her." That evening, Ethan had every major news outlet on speed dial. One leak, one single piece of real evidence was all it would take to send the story spinning back in their favor. And he had it. Brandon had delivered the missing security footage, an old grainy clip from a Phoenix gas station, the night Claire had been abandoned. It didn't show Madison's face, but it showed a woman in expensive heels, wearing a bracelet identical to one Madison had owned for years, stepping out of a sleek black car. It wasn't hard proof, but it was enough to make people doubt her story, enough to rip her carefully crafted victim narrative apart. Within hours of the footage leaking, the headlines shifted. New evidence contradicts Madison Blake's claims. Was she hiding something all along? Anonymous source. Madison's involvement in missing child case under new scrutiny. Did Ethan Blake's wife orchestrate a 15-year cover-up? Claire read every article, her pulse racing. "She's losing control," she murmured. Ethan smirked. "Just wait." And then, Madison made her mistake. At exactly 8:47 p.m., Madison Blake walked into a televised interview. She sat before the cameras, poised, her makeup perfect, her voice measured, but for the first time, Claire saw it. A flicker of panic beneath her polished exterior. She was trying too hard to hold the story together, trying too hard to act like she wasn't afraid. The journalist leaned in. "Mrs. Blake, there's a new theory that suggests you may have had prior knowledge of your stepdaughter's disappearance. What do you say to these allegations?" Madison laughed softly, shaking her head. "It's absurd, truly." She took a slow sip of water before adding, "Ethan is desperate. I feel for him. I really do. But his grief has twisted into something dangerous. He's not the man people think he is." Claire gritted her teeth as she watched. Then, the fatal moment, the journalist pressed further. "So you deny any involvement?" Madison's mask cracked, her lips parted just for a fraction of a second. Her pupils dilated, and then she recovered too quickly. "No," she said smoothly, shaking her head. "I had nothing to do with it." But Claire saw it, and she wasn't the only one. The internet exploded. Twitter, news sites, forums, people dissecting her body language, pointing out the tiny moment of hesitation. And just like that, the doubt spread like wildfire. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching the screen with satisfaction. "She's losing," he murmured. Claire exhaled, feeling a flicker of victory for the first time. "Not just losing." She turned to Ethan, her expression deadly serious. "She's falling apart." Ethan met her gaze, something dangerous and determined settling between them. "This is it, Claire," he said quietly. Claire swallowed, her heart pounding. They were at the breaking point, and when Madison finally snapped, they would be ready. Madison Blake was unraveling. It was all over the news. Every headline, every whisper in high society, every online theory, all of it was about her now. She had spent years perfecting the illusion of control. Every smile, every carefully chosen word, every calculated public appearance had built a reputation so polished, it seemed untouchable. But now, the foundation was crumbling, and Madison was furious. Sitting in the dim glow of her private lounge, she swirled a glass of red wine, watching the muted television screen. The journalist's words echoed in her mind. "Did you have prior knowledge of your stepdaughter's disappearance?" That single question had changed everything, because no matter how flawlessly she had denied it, they had seen it, the hesitation, the brief crack in her mask. And now, she was losing. A sharp knock at the door snapped her out of her thoughts. She didn't turn. "Enter." The door creaked open, and Hunter stepped inside. Madison's lips curled slightly. Her most trusted weapon. He had been by her side for years. Her fixer, her enforcer, her shadow, and right now, she needed him more than ever. "You saw the news," she murmured, sipping her wine. Hunter's jaw tightened. "It's bad." Madison exhaled slowly. "Ethan has made his move. Hunter folded his arms. He's cornering you. He wants you to snap. Madison let out a soft chuckle. Oh, darling, he wants me to panic, but he doesn't realize. She turned, her eyes gleaming. I'm most dangerous when I have nothing left to lose. Hunter didn't flinch. What's the plan? Madison downed the rest of her wine, setting the glass aside. Simple, she said smoothly. I'm going to make Claire disappear. Again, Hunter's brows lifted. That's risky, Madison smirked. Not if it looks like an accident, Hunter exhaled. He had seen this side of Madison before, the cold, ruthless predator beneath the glamour, and he knew better than to argue. Madison rose from her chair, adjusting the silk robe around her body. Make the arrangements, she ordered. Hunter nodded once, then slipped out of the room. Madison turned back to the television. She watched Ethan and Claire on the screen, the way they stood side by side, a united front for a brief moment. Something twisted inside her. Jealousy. That girl, the one she had tried to erase, was back. And worse, she was winning. Madison's fingers clenched into fists. Not for long. The trap is set the next evening. Claire stood on the balcony of Ethan's mansion, watching the sunset stain the sky in gold and crimson hues. She had never seen anything more beautiful, but the peace was deceptive, because deep down, she knew. Madison wasn't done. Ethan stepped beside her, his presence grounding. You okay? Claire nodded, but she didn't take her eyes off the horizon. She's going to come after me. Ethan's jaw tightened. I know. Claire finally turned to face him. We need to be ready. Ethan exhaled. We are. Claire studied him. Are we? Ethan hesitated, then met her gaze. We have Brandon watching her every move. We have the evidence. She's trapped, Claire. Claire swallowed. That's the problem. Ethan frowned. She's trapped, Claire repeated, her voice quieter. And when you trap a predator, they don't surrender. Ethan's expression darkened. They attack. Claire nodded, and she had a feeling that when Madison finally attacked, she wasn't going to hold back. The ambush the plan was executed with surgical precision. It started with a fake message. Claire's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Meet me at the garden entrance. I have something you need to see. Come alone. Claire's heart pounded. She knew this was it. She knew Madison was making her move, and instead of running, she walked straight into it. Claire slipped out of the house quietly, making her way toward the garden entrance. The night air was crisp, the only sound the distant crash of waves against the shore. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she kept going because she wasn't afraid anymore. Then, a shadow moved. Before she could react, a pair of strong arms grabbed her from behind. Claire gasped. Struggling, but the grip was too tight. A voice whispered in her ear, "You should have stayed gone." Madison. Claire twisted violently, her elbow slamming into Madison's ribs. Madison cursed, stumbling back. But before Claire could run, Hunter stepped out of the darkness and he had a gun. Claire froze. Madison straightened, brushing her hair out of her face, her fury barely contained. Did you really think you could take everything from me? Madison hissed, stepping closer. That I would just let you ruin my life. Claire's pulse thundered in her ears. Madison's lips curled into a smile. You don't belong here. Claire, you never did. Claire clenched her fists. You stole my life. Madison laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. I saved Ethan. You were a weight around his neck. And now, you're nothing but a threat. Her voice dropped to a cold whisper. And I erase threats. Hunter raised the gun, and Claire knew. This was it. Except Madison had made one mistake. She had underestimated Ethan. A loud click echoed in the darkness. Madison stiffened. Claire turned her head, and there he was. Ethan stood just beyond the shadows, a gun aimed directly at Hunter's head. His voice was lethal. Drop it. Hunter hesitated. Ethan stepped closer. I won't say it again. Madison's eyes widened. She had lost control, and she knew it. Hunter's fingers twitched. But then, he dropped the gun. Claire exhaled sharply. Ethan's eyes stayed locked on Madison, deadly, unforgiving. You wanted war, Madison. His voice was dangerously soft. You just lost. Madison's breath came fast. Her entire world collapsing around her, Claire took a slow step forward. I hope you enjoyed your little game, she murmured. Madison's hands trembled because for the first time in her entire life, she had no way out. For the first time in her life, Madison Blake had lost control. The moment Hunter's gun hit the ground, the illusion shattered. She had spent years manipulating, maneuvering, eliminating anything and anyone who threatened her perfect existence. But now, she was the one trapped. Ethan stood before her, gun steady, his expression carved from pure ice. Claire was beside him, her gaze locked onto Madison with something even more dangerous than hatred. Justice. Madison's pulse pounded in her ears. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to win. Her mind raced. Think. Fix this. Slowly, she forced a bitter smile onto her lips. Well, her voice was smooth, but inside she was panicking. What's your plan now, Ethan? Are you really going to shoot me? Ethan didn't flinch. No. A flicker of relief, until she saw the cold amusement in his eyes. That would be too easy. Claire took a step forward, her chin high. You don't get to escape this, Madison. Not this time. Madison scoffed, crossing her arms. Oh, please. Do you think anyone will believe your little story? I have power. I have... Sirens. Distant. But getting closer, Madison's body went rigid. She turned to Hunter. You told me the police weren't... Hunter didn't move. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting to Ethan. Madison's stomach dropped. Ethan smirked. You really thought I'd walk into your trap without setting one of my own? Madison's breath hitched. No. Ethan shrugged. You were predictable, Madison. You always have been. The realization hit her like a freight train. Ethan had never been one step behind. He had been leading her exactly where he wanted. Claire exhaled, shaking her head. It's over. Madison's lips parted. Not in a smirk, not in confidence. In horror, because she knew what was coming. The end. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights flashing beyond the garden walls. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. This is the LAPD. Come out with your hands where we can see them. Madison's entire world shattered. No. She turned to run, but Hunter grabbed her wrist. Her head snapped toward him, rage and betrayal flashing in her eyes. You idiot. What are you? Hunter's expression was empty. I'm done. Madison froze. Hunter let go of her wrist, stepping away, and that was the moment she knew. She was alone. For the first time, no one was coming to save her. No connections, no money, no lies big enough to undo what had been done. And as the police officers rushed through the gates, weapons drawn, Madison Blake, the woman who had controlled everything, was finally powerless. Ethan didn't say a word. Claire didn't either. They just watched, because there was nothing left to say. 2 officers grabbed Madison, forcing her arms behind her back. She screamed, struggling wildly. You can't do this to me. Her voice wasn't polished anymore. It was raw, desperate. I'm Madison Blake, do you hear me? I own this city. But no one listened. The handcuffs clicked shut. Her screams faded into silence. And just like that, Madison Blake was done. The aftermath, the house felt different after Madison was gone. Lighter, like a dark cloud had finally lifted. Claire sat in the living room, staring out at the waves. It still didn't feel real. She had spent years feeling like something in her life was missing. And now, here she was, whole. She heard footsteps and turned to see Ethan approaching. He held 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to her before sitting down beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, she's really gone, Claire murmured. Ethan exhaled, shaking his head. Not gone enough. But at least she'll never hurt anyone again. Claire took a slow sip of whiskey, letting the warmth spread through her. I used to think I'd never get answers. Ethan studied her. And now, Claire turned to face him. Now I have everything I need. She meant it. It wasn't just about revenge or exposing the truth. It was about finally knowing who she was. She set her glass down, brushing a hand over the butterfly pendant at her neck. For the first time in 15 years, she wasn't Claire Evans. She was Grace Blake, and no one was taking that from her again. Ethan watched her, something unreadable in his eyes. So what's next for you? Claire exhaled. I don't know. But then she smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't tinged with pain. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. Ethan clinked his glass against hers. To new beginnings. Claire held his gaze, and as the ocean waves crashed against the shore, she whispered, "To home." The days after Madison's arrest felt surreal. Her face was plastered across every news channel, her downfall dissected in headlines and talk shows. The fall of Madison Blake, a life built on lies. The truth behind Grace Blake's disappearance. Once a socialite, now a criminal. The woman who thought she could get away with it all. The world finally knew who Madison Blake truly was. And Claire, Grace, was free. Yet, as she stood on the balcony of Ethan's mansion, staring at the ocean, she couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. She had spent her entire life searching for answers, and now she had them. But what came next? She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Ethan stood there, watching her carefully. Couldn't sleep. Claire exhaled. Too much on my mind. Ethan stepped beside her, resting his hands on the railing. I get it. Silence stretched between them. The only sound was the distant crash of waves. Then, what happens now? Claire finally asked. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. That's up to you, Claire swallowed, looking out at the dark horizon. I don't even know where to start. Ethan studied her. You start by living. Claire turned to him. He held her gaze, his voice quieter now. You've spent 15 years in the dark. 15 years not knowing who you were, where you belonged. He exhaled. You're free now, Grace. You get to choose your own future. The way he said her name, Grace, sent a shiver through her. It felt real now, like she had finally claimed it. She nodded slowly. I think I want to go back to Austin, just for a little while. Ethan frowned slightly. Are you sure? Claire gave him a small smile. Yeah, that's where I grew up. It might not have been my real home, but it's a part of me. I think I need to go back before I figure out where I really belong. Ethan was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. I understand. Claire hesitated. And you? Ethan smirked slightly. I'll be here, cleaning up the mess Madison left behind. Claire exhaled, shaking her head. You're really not going to miss her, huh? Ethan let out a dark chuckle. Not even for a second. Claire laughed softly, and for the first time it wasn't forced. It was real. She turned back to the ocean, inhaling deeply. For so long, she had lived with a void inside her. A constant ache. A whisper that something was missing now. The ache was still there, but it was different. Because now, she had a choice. She wasn't lost anymore. She was Grace Blake, and she was going to be okay. 3 weeks later, Austin felt smaller than she remembered. The city was still busy, still filled with memories. But everything looked different now. Or maybe she was the one who had changed. Claire, Grace, walked through the familiar streets, the weight on her chest lighter than it had been in years. She had spent days visiting old places, the orphanage, the little bookstore she used to sneak into as a teenager, even the tiny coffee shop where she had worked after high school. She had lived a life here, a different life, and now she was ready to let it go. She pulled out her phone and dialed. Ethan answered on the second ring. Hey, he said, his voice warm. Grace smiled. Hey, how's Austin? She exhaled. Different, but good. Ethan was silent for a beat. Are you ready? Grace closed her eyes for a moment. Then, yes. She opened them, staring up at the clear blue sky. I'm coming home. Ethan didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. I'll be waiting. And just like that, she knew. She wasn't just leaving Austin. She was going home. For real. This time, epilogue 6 months later, Grace stood on the stage of a charity gala, staring at the audience before her. She took a breath, gripping the podium. This isn't just a fundraiser, she said, her voice steady. This is a promise. She glanced at Ethan in the front row. This foundation is dedicated to every child who is forgotten, to every person who lost themselves along the way. We will never stop searching. We will never stop fighting. The audience erupted into applause, and as Grace stepped off the stage, she felt it. The ache was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She was more than her past. She was here, alive, whole, and this was only the beginning.